Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of the Afghanistan podcast. Joining me today, we have someone who we can now proudly classify as a recurring guest to the podcast. It's actually someone we had on the show just a few days ago. And at the time, we were talking about the military conflict between India and Pakistan that took place in May of this year, so just last month. And of course, I'm talking about Carl Zha. As happens, just when I was recording that episode with Carl, I think it was a day or two after that Israel's attack on Iran took place. And for me personally, that kind of took me through a whole spectrum of emotions. Before the attacks took place, I was actually very confident that Israel and USA will not attack Iran. And my confidence was simply based on the fact that I simply couldn't see any clear path to success for them. And because of that, I was thinking they will not do this stupidity and misadventure. But I was wrong. Israel did attack. And the way they attacked was a typical Israeli bordering on terrorism attack. And so that kind of took me from being confident to being confused, and obviously to get rid of the confusion and naturally doing what we do. I got down to studying, listening to lots of analysts. But the more I was listening and the more conflicting kind of comments that were coming out and depressing comments, it took me from being confused to being depressed. And until just recently, I heard two interviews that gave me a lot of clarity and actually gave me confidence back. And those two interviews, one, of course, was Carl's interview, and another one was another Chinese gentleman whose name I won't mention just now, and I'll bring that up later in this episode. But Carl's interview that I listened to, it was addressing a lot of the questions, a lot of the concerns that I had, questions that I couldn't find answers to before. And Carl, in his very typical kind of way, gave a lot of clarity, but in a very kind of a humorous way as well. So it kind of put me at ease. And I thought I must get Carl back for the benefit of everyone so we can kind of go through some of these questions with Carl. And I'm really grateful that Carl gave us time at very short notice. So Carl, thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you for inviting me back, Tafin.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Carl, I was going to have you back anyway because I want to know, you're such a treasure of information relating to China. And I think really at this point in time, everyone needs to know more about China, whether that is to do with trade, business, strategy, politics, or even if you hate China, I think you need to know more about China. And to be honest, I have a lot of topics in mind that I wanted to talk to you about maybe one day in the future, because I wanted to prepare some of my questions a bit more. But this kind of topic has just come out of nowhere. So I listened to one of your interviews, Carl, a recent interview. Listeners can access that on your show, Silk and Steel. And let's start from some of the topics you addressed there. So when this attack took place, the Israeli attack on Iran, obviously a lot of people were taken aback by the nature of the attack, the way it took place. It was almost like a sucker punch on Iran. And so a lot of people started looking at China, thinking, what the hell is China doing? What's China going to do? And that's one of the questions that you addressed. So should we start from there? What is China doing?
Well, that's right. But first of all, I like to talk about what is Iran doing, because Iran is the one that's been attacked by Israel.
Of course.
And right now, Iran is actually doing fine responding to its Israeli aggression, because Israel, the reason Israel took this attack is because this is what they always wanted to do. This is Netanyahu. Israel cannot stand to have any regional power in the Middle East at all, other than Israel. So we have General Wesley Clark, who was a Spring NATO commander, who gave an interview. This was more than, I think, 10, 15 years ago. And he said right after 9/11, someone from Pentagon told him there was a plan to take out 7 countries in 5 years. And they listed the countries, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Sudan. And basically the only one on the list that still standing somewhat is Iran. I mean, Iran has always been the target. And for domestic reasons, Netanyahu also want to take this war to Iran because for him, he needs to remain the wartime president in order to stay out of jail because he is under a lot of accusation of corruption, and if he steps down from presidency, he's gonna be thrown into jail basically. So his political survival depending on him to expand the war, to prolong the war. So his hope is that being the wartime president will keep himself out of jail. So that's personal reason. But this has been a long-term plan that's worked out between Israel and United States. This is a joint venture. This is not Israel is manipulating United States or US is this is United States and Israel is one animal. Different heads, one animal. And the Israeli media was very clear. They said when Trump entered into the negotiation with Iran over denuclearization, that was a ruse to put Iran at ease, to think that they are now on working on a peace deal that allow Israel to attack while the Iranian guards were down. So this was U.S. is already complicit in the attack. Now, what we have seen so far is after the initial Israeli aggression against Iran has responded. Iran responded with ballistic missile attack on Israel, and it continued to this day. It has been several days now. We saw Tel Aviv getting hit. We saw Haifa getting hit. We saw a Iranian missile literally switch the light off at the port in Haifa, and this is something that the Israelis haven't really experienced before. So far, they have been committing atrocity in Gaza with impunity, and this is the first time they are tasting consequences of their own action. Now, what we also have seen is that there's a now the so-called Iron Dome, and all the U.S. air defense system that's lying around Israel, including the THAAD system, which the U.S. has deployed to Israel, hasn't been effective in stopping the Iranian ballistic missile retaliation. And they are becoming increasingly more ineffective because what we've seen is more Iranian missiles are finding their targets. And this is because, just the simple physics. The missile shield depends on shooting a bullet with a bullet. But in such a situation, if you apply enough missiles, you can overwhelm any kind of ballistic shield defense. It's just simple numbers. It's a matter of math and physics. And what Iran has done is they first send waves of their older missiles, the missiles from been rusting in the arsenal for 20, 30 years. They lob out at Israel in the first round to get Israel to deplete its interceptor missiles. Yeah. And we're seeing that it's taking effect because as during newer wave of Iranian missile attacks, they're mixing in the older missiles now with the new, more advanced missiles. And that's confusing the Israeli air defense system, and that's allow Iranian missiles to get more hit. But one other reason is simply the Israeli Iron Dome system are running out of interceptor missiles. Now they're openly admitting this, by the way, in the reports of Wall Street Journal and Washington Post. They said Israel probably have 12 days before they completely run out of interceptor missiles. So as long as Iran can keep up their missile barrage, Israel is not going to win this exchange. Now,
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think how quickly Iran regrouped after that first day was kind of showed their readiness. They were completely prepared for the attack. They just weren't prepared for the way the attack took place on that first day. But also talking about the interceptor missiles. So this THAAD system that USA has given Israel, it's a little bit of a joke because the THAAD system has 48 interceptor missiles. In this kind of back and forth conflict that's taking place, 48 missiles aren't going to go far. But each one of those missiles costs about $12 million. Whereas I was reading somewhere that so the best missiles that Iran has, which is the Fatah one, each one of them costs about $200,000. So you have $200,000 being intercepted by $12 million. And there's only 48 of them that they have. And America can supply more, but they don't have that many more in their stockpiles. And apparently the production levels are such that they can maybe produce between 60 and 100 in a year. So you're absolutely right. I think basically it's kind of opened up the skies for Iran. And also I think the way the two countries are, their strategies, because Iran has planes, F-35s, that is quite a complicated kind of a mission because you have to go over a lot of airspaces, a lot of countries, attack into Iran, refuel, get back, try not to get hit. Whereas all Iran has to do is just keep lobbing missiles over. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that the concern is that at what level, at what stage will USA either decide to come in or decide that it's not in USA's benefit to come in and maybe need to stop this whole thing at some stage.
Well, yeah, that's correct. You, as you pointed out, each that missile, interceptor missile cost $12 million, and the estimate right now is Israelis are firing about $286 million worth of interceptor missile every day. Of course, that money means nothing because United States can always give them more money. You know, money is immaterial. U.S. Federal Reserve can always print more. Right. However, you can print money, but you cannot print missiles. You know, you still have to physically produce missiles. U.S. has been so financialized. You know, money they can literally, you know, it's just digital. You're just typing a additional zero into the system that will work. But what we have learned is that money will not buy you industrial capacity. That's what United States lacks right now. Especially after they have been hollowing out the manufacturing sector for last 40 years by shipping them to East Asia. And so that's affecting, now it's starting to affect U.S. military industrial complex. They just simply cannot keep up with the production. And, you know, they already depleted a lot of their arsenals by sending them over to Ukraine in a proxy war against Russia, and now, you know, supplying Israel. On top of that, China has been restricting rare earth shipment to United States. Those rare earth and the rare earth made heat-resistant magnets are crucial into going into F-35s and into those missiles. And China basically said, okay, now any company that wants to access rare earth or rare earth magnets from China, you need to send a right application to the Chinese Commerce Ministry for them to approve it. And so far, as a result of the trade talks in London, China has agreed to grant export licenses for several U.S. automakers for 6 months. After 6 months, they need to reapply. But that does not apply to Lockheed Martin, which makes F-35. So the ban on export to U.S. defense industry is still in place. For U.S. it's a supply issue. It's a industrial capacity issue, whether they can replenish those ammunition for Israeli air defense system. Now, but you're right. I mean, this is why right now Israel is crying. They're crying out to United States. They want the U.S. to join this war against Iran directly as soon as possible, because they cannot handle it themselves. They are not. They want U.S. to do this because Iran is actually a real regional power that Israel cannot take them on by themselves. So this is always part of the plan on the part of Israel, by the way. They have always wanted to drag the United States deeper into the Middle Eastern war because they know they can do it. They cannot do it by themselves, but they know U.S. could, maybe. And that's why we're seeing Donald Trump are making threatening noises on Twitter, on True Social. He's been writing stuff like unconditional surrender, immediately. But
evacuate Iran.
But I quote tweeted his tweet. I said, barking dogs rarely bite, because why would you telegraph your intentions? It's been several days now. It's not like when Trump first made the aggressive noise, everybody expecting U.S. is gonna attack within the next 24 hours. It's been 3 days. He's still making threatening noises on social media. Well, one of the reason is U.S. right now, they don't have all the hardware, their military hardware in place to launch a attack on Iran. But right now there was a announcement just recently that they supposedly going to send the third aircraft carrier attack group to the region, which is serious. If this third aircraft carrier group actually sets sail, then it becomes serious, because even though United States have 11 aircraft carrier group on paper, but most of those 11 aircraft carrier groups are in the docks, under repair, going through maintenance. So the most that U.S. can mobilize at any time simultaneously right now is three aircraft carrier group. If all 3 aircraft carrier group going to Iran, that means, okay, maybe something serious is going down. And first, we're not looking at a ground invasion, right? This is not Iraq. Iraq, prior to Iraq invasion, they drag out the whole supposedly UN weapon inspector drama for like 6 months, for a near to allow United States to build up their ground forces. And back then, U.S. Army actually have the capacity. They actually have those Army transport ships that allow them to ship 170,000 troops to the Middle East. Well, they don't have that anymore. U.S. Army already scrapped all their transport ships. They don't have that.
As you mentioned, Iran is like 4 times bigger than Iraq, so they'll need about 500,000 or 600,000.
Exactly. First of all, right now, U.S. don't have that kind of transportation capacity to ship troops to the Middle East, and even if they scramble enough ships to do that, it will take time. It will take months to do the kind of logistic buildup that's going to happen in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in UAE, in those places. So we're not looking at imminent ground invasion by United States. So without a ground invasion, they will not be able to do a regime change in Iran. Iran is not it's not like Libya, where they can just bomb the countries and the regime will collapse. Right now, what we have seen is Iranian people actually rallying around the flag. Even the Iranian liberals, who are
Yes.
really counted on by those regime change ops in the West to say, oh, the Iranian people, see, we're going there as liberators, right? They're gonna greet us with cakes and flowers. Those are things they said before going to Iraq, by the way. And even those Iranian liberals are going into the streets of Tehran right now and saying, we need the bomb. Please give us a bomb so we can defend ourselves. We need to have nukes. And so Iranians are very patriotic people. They will rally around the flag. And this is only going to shore a continuous bombing going to shore up the solidarity. And so bombing alone would not cause a regime collapse in Iraq. And again, Iraq was about around 20 million people at the time of Iraq war. Today Iran has more than 92 million people. It's both in terms of size and the population, Iran is magnitude bigger, and its capacity is also magnitude bigger. It's much more powerful.
And the terrain is so much more difficult. It's so mountainous and
Exactly. So any kind of ground invasion of Iran is kind of ridiculous talk. It's crazy talk at this point. It's a month away. It's at least a month away, because it would take them many months to do that kind of military buildup to do a full ground invasion. So what could happen? What more realistically could happen is U.S. launching a bombing run on what they would call Iran's nuclear facility. And this is a more likely scenario, is that Trump will send, maybe a bunch of B-2, B-21 bombers over and drop some bombs and say, oh, we did it. We stopped Iran's nuclear program. Mission accomplished. I'm the great peacemaker of Middle East. I stopped Iran's nuclear program. I brought peace. I mean, that's more likely for in case of Trump, because he's the type of the person that like to do spectacular things, then claim victory. Claim victory regardless of the results. That's what Trump did during the tariff war, by the way. He claimed victory in the tariff war versus the world, versus China. Even though everybody knows it's bullshit, but his supporters will buy it because they're fanatics. And so that is most likely scenario.
it's exactly what he did in Yemen.
Exactly. And remember, in Yemen, U.S. Navy, the U.S. Navy commander said this was the most intense operation for the U.S. Navy after World War II. And then, and what happened? Well, they went against a country with no air defense and no air force, and they lost 3 F-18 aircrafts doing it. And there was report they almost lost their F-35 to Yemeni missiles, and Iran has much better missiles and more advanced missiles than Yemen. So the U.S. Navy that couldn't even handle Yemen, is not realistic to expect them to be able to handle Iran. And by the way, all the U.S. bases in the Middle East, all the U.S. bases in Qatar, etc., they're all falls under the Iranian missile range. So
yes,
now
that's what I was going to say. That because whatever America does, they have all these bases spread across the Middle East, and all of them are completely unprotected. They're sitting ducks. So it makes me wonder a little bit as well, that even if Trump just wanted to do like a token strike just to keep face, to say, yes, I've done it, and give me the Nobel Peace Prize now, how will Iran retaliate even with like a token kind of an attack? Because I think, personally speaking, I don't think even with B-2 bombers and with their bunker busting bombs, I don't think it's so easy to destroy the underground facilities of Iran, simply because, first of all, they don't even know what they're dealing with. What is the shape of these? What's the structure like? Because unless it's like a complete, as I was listening to like people like Ted Postal and others, they were saying unless it's like it has a completely flat surface where the projectile can go at like a 90-degree angle, even if it has like something like a diamond shape where the projectile is just going to slip to one side, it's just not going to be effective. So they have no idea what they're dealing with. And I think it's not going to be a walk in the park, even if America actually really tried to destroy these bunkers. But the question is, how is Iran going to react?
That's a great question. We're all talking about hypotheticals now, right? We're talking about if United States do a symbolic strike, and how will Iran will respond. Well, so far we can judge by how Iran is responding to the Israeli attack. Iran is responding by attacking Israel in a way that's causing a lot of pain on the Israeli side, but not intense enough that will collapse Israel's state, because they know if Israel is facing imminent collapse, then for sure that will draw in United States, because U.S. would not let Israel collapse. So they have been doing a very calibrated campaign of causing just enough damage, enough pain in Israel to let them know you're going to have to pay a price for what you're doing. And at the same time, not pushing Israeli to the brink that United States will for sure jump in. So I think that if U.S. launches a symbolic strike, it's likely Iran will do a similar response. So which means they will target U.S. bases inside Syria and Iraq, because those bases are most exposed, and they are surrounded by also like militias that have been supplied and supported by Iran. So these bases are at most risk to Iranian missile attack or motor attack by Iran supported militias. And so
I agree. I was thinking this as well, because Iraqi government doesn't want those bases in Iraq as well. They just can't get rid of them. So Iran might take this as an opportunity to just kind of go for those bases in Iraq.
Exactly. Those will be easy targets. Whereas if they do target Qatar, UAE, etc., you might get more serious, because you might draw in the Gulf countries into the conflict. So I think that the easy ones to go after will be those isolated U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq. And if U.S. is only carrying out very limited symbolic strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, if it's more serious, if U.S. is doing carpet bombing, then forget it. All Middle East is going up in flames. All the U.S. bases, all the U.S. aircraft carrier group, everything is fair game, and they're gonna have to stay the hell away from the Gulf, because they will all be sitting ducks. I mean, the real question now really comes into how many missiles Iran have in stockpile, and how many missiles they can continue to produce. Now that's a real question, because as long as Iran can keep producing missiles, as long as there's shitloads of missiles, they can just keep firing them. They can just keep on firing them at Israel, at U.S. bases. So one of the thing I'm looking at is now, like, supposedly Israel is claiming they have now controlled the airspace above Iran, and they're bombing Iranian missile factories. Well, I think a lot of that is just BS, because Iranian missile attack on Israel hasn't slowed down yet. There might be, in the latest wave, there might be less number of missiles, but they're getting more hits because they're more accurate, and also Israelis themselves are running out of missile interceptors. And so the question is how long Iran can keep up their
From what I understand, I think Iran's got so many missiles it can carry on for a whole year. But I think what Israel's trying to do at this point is not even trying to go after the missiles now. It's trying to go after the batteries that Iran uses to launch those missiles. And I think Israel's thinking that might be an easier target to eliminate the batteries, which is an interesting strategy.
Right. And so this is where we brings to the article that's reporting in Washington Post that is Iran has bought tons of missile making materials from China. This actually the reported date. They said this transaction took place before the Israeli attack.
Yeah.
So whatever materials Iran needed to make more missiles, they already got it from China. And I'm sure if they need more and if they request more from China, I'm sure China will be able to supply them, because China now they just optimized the real link from China to Iran, going through Central Asia, and that railway is well beyond the range of the U.S. Navy. And so as long as China is willing, they can continuously supply Iran with whatever missile parts, materials they need to make more missiles. It's more a matter of whether Iran can preserve their missile factories and their missile making capabilities. Then they will not have troubles sourcing components, because China can provide that. That's not a problem. And whereas at the same time, China is not providing those critical mineral magnets to United States anymore. If Lockheed Martin wants them, they have to write application to the Chinese Commerce Ministry, and it's up to the Chinese Commerce Ministry to decide whether they're going to grant them that export license. And as far as we know, China hasn't resigned their ban against the Chinese, against the U.S. military industrial complex, which they put on last year. And so right now, what we do know is there's a very real supply constraint on both Israeli side and U.S. side. We are not quite sure what is the supply constraint on the Iranian side in terms of producing those missiles. They're not gonna. China can supply them with materials and components. It's whether they will have enough factories in Iran that hasn't that either haven't been damaged by Israeli attack, or Iranians can repair them fast enough to continue the production. So as long as they can continue to produce missiles, Iran can continue this barrage of Israel, and Israel will continue to feel the of the pressure. And let's remember, a lot of these Israeli settlers, they're able to carry on having fun, while carrying out this supporting this horrible genocide on Gaza, is because they mostly haven't been their normal life hasn't been disrupted, hasn't been affected. The moment the missile raining down from the sky become the norm, a lot of people will leave. And this
I've heard they're escaping by boats now.
There's already report Israeli government are banning people from leaving, and because what are you gonna do? What's a settler colonial state gonna do when you run out of settlers? When your settlers are all left, they're all bailing, and that's what's gonna happen if Iran keep on the missile barrage. Their economy, which is already at brink of collapse, Israeli economy won't collapse. There will be, they will become a basket case. It will depend entirely on handout from United States. But at the same time, just for the simple fact that most people won't able to have carry on normal life. And guess what? Most Israelis, they have multiple passports. Despite the claim that we have nowhere to go. No, they have somewhere to go. They have plenty of places to go. And all they need is to purchase that plane ticket and get the hell out of there. And many of them are doing that already. And so as long as Iran applied that, and this is the difference between Iran and Israel, is that Iran is a huge country. So whatever Israel can throw at them, it's like it's like pinpricks. Whereas
Israel,
Iran,
like a postal stamp on the map.
Iran only need to make sure all their missiles land in this small place. Just hit Tel Aviv, hit Haifa, like makes their urban living hell, and
Yeah.
that they're not going to be able to hold out for very long. So,
Yeah.
so right now, we're really looking at a timeline of the next couple weeks. Since we already have the report
that because I don't think Israel can last 2 weeks at this rate.
Well, I mean, like right now, we know they're going to run out of interceptor missiles in 12 days, 10 to 12 days. This is why I said 2 weeks. Maybe U.S. can do some emergency resupply, but there's only so much U.S. has in stock. Their stock has already been depleted, as they themselves admitted. And U.S. remember, U.S. still have to save them for themselves. They cannot give away the entire store because they're still preparing for a big confrontation with China. Even during the Iran-Israel conflict, I already saw some liberals saying, "Oh my God, why are we wasting those fat interceptor missiles? They could save our aircraft carrier group in our confrontation with China." And I'm just laughing because I'm like, look, if your fat missile can't even handle Iranian missile barrage,
China's sitting there laughing probably.
China is laughing because China can produce shit tons of more missiles, more advanced missiles. China is literally making missiles from automated lights off factory that's run by robots that can run 24/7, cranking missiles off the assembly line. You cannot match that kind of industrial capacity. That's kind of the industrial capacity that we don't there's doesn't exist anymore in the United States, and that they won't be able to match. So this is why I said before in my previous interview, and I will say it again. I will go out. I will put myself out there. I say, if U.S. enters this war, and if not, I'm not talking about like just a symbolic strike and call it victory. That I'm talking about, like, if they're seriously going to like a full war against Iran, intending on regime change or whatever, this will be the end of U.S. empire. This will be the end, because
I think you say that. I think
because the level of Iranian resistance and the amount of stuff that Iran can toss their way will show everybody in the world that this so-called U.S. Power, the U.S. military power that was constructed through decades of Hollywood propaganda, is smoke and mirrors. This smoke and mirrors. I mean, we already know from U.S. have regularly been conducting war games against Iran, against their components like Iran, China, etc. And all the war games we know in the past, they lost. The only way they won the war game is when they rigged the game. They have to literally rig their own war game in order to win against Iran, because they realize as long as they keep their aircraft carriers group around the Gulf, it's sitting ducks, it's sitting targets against Iranian missiles. So it all comes back to the same question: whether Iran can keep on cracking out those missiles. As long as Iran can crank out those missiles, are good. Just keep them coming.
I don't know if do you normally listen to Scott Ritter? So recently, I have a lot of respect for Scott Ritter. I think he's a very good analyst. He's very brave for the things that he says. But recently, he's been talking about, like, firstly, he's been saying that he put a lot of blame on Iran increasing the uranium enrichment to 60%, because that's like showing a red rag to a bull, because basically they asked for it. Secondly, he thinks that as a result, Iran is going to get from USA what he calls a nation-ending strike. I have problems with both of those things. So first of all, when it comes to the enrichment thing, Iran is well within its legal limits in what it was doing. But secondly, it was only cranking up the enrichment levels to use as a leverage, because they, under complete sanctions, they've been abiding by the agreement that they had, that Trump pulled out of, and still the sanctions weren't being lifted. And that was causing a lot of problems for society there. So they were using it as a leverage, and they're willing to to get rid of those enriched uranium if a deal can be reached. But secondly, when Scott Ritter talks about a nation-ending campaign by USA, I have no idea what he means. I mean, I can understand a regime-ending campaign. What does a nation-ending? Iran is a historic nation, and as you mentioned, it's a huge nation. What does a nation-ending campaign even mean? So I completely disagree with Scott Ritter there, and I think, as you've pointed so eloquently, there's so many obstacles. USA isn't the power that it used to be when they launched the war in Iraq, and Iran is in Iraq.
Well, I mean, I have my difference with Scott Ritter. I used to do like podcasts with him, and people can look it up, where I openly air my disagreement with him in our segment. So I mean, I have a lot of respect for him, because for him, from a American with coming from a military background, should be in the anti-war. So I respect him for that. But at the end of the day, though, Scott is still very much a America number one, America supremacist person mentality at heart. I respect for it. My respect for him comes from his stance against the U.S. foreign policy, but sometimes you can't. It's hard to take out that American supremacist mentality, even from someone like Scott Ritter. And my disagreement with him was coming to talk about China. He's basically also saying, like, why is China provoking United States? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Exactly. And he's thinking like, oh yeah, but because U.S. can bring on so much pain and hurt. I'm like, what are you talking about? China have nukes. What's United States gonna do? And then we ended up start talking about nuclear arsenal size in China, United States, which is ridiculous. Like, this is why this is what I said to Scott Ritter on our. People can look it up on my debate with Scott on my channel, and I told him, I say, Scott, I respect you. I respect your job as a non-proliferation guy, but you just gave the best argument for nuclear proliferation. Like this is a reason why people should get nukes. Exactly. If Iran actually have nuclear weapon, we would not even be talking about this right now. United States is not making this kind of insane threat against North Korea at the moment. Why? Because North Korea actually do have nuclear weapons, and they also have delivery capabilities. They have missiles that can deliver it. This is why nobody in Congress is making crazy threat about taking out Kim Jong-un or bombing Pyongyang, because they know that will be crazy talk. And if you, this is why I think, I understand why Iran has put off their nuclear program, because they thought they have a chance to reconciliate with the West to get the sanction removed. They thought, that was more important for them to get their economy back on track, to remove the sanctions, to start trading again. But the problem is, these are not, United States is not they don't negotiate in good faith. We already saw that. It's not, to Scott's point, it's never about negotiation. Israel took out all the negotiators. They literally kill all the Iranian negotiators. They don't want a deal. They do not want a peace deal at all. They want war. And this is what's going on. And this is why when Trump was asked, because his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified in front of the Congress back in March, she said, no, Iran currently do not have a nuclear weapon, and they're not pursuing a nuclear program at the moment. She testified in front of Congress, and people throw that at Trump, and Trump said, I don't care what she said. I don't care. It's only his own director of national intelligence who have access to all the American intelligence agencies. And she said, I don't care. I don't care what she said. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. This is because they have already made up their mind to prosecute a war against Iran. It's not, this is, you cannot appease these people. There's no appeasement, because they don't have peace in mind. Their plan is to wage a war. Sometimes the only way to stop this kind of aggression is how do you stop a bully? If you you cannot make a peace with a bully, because the bully will just keep on bullying you. They're going to push even harder. The way you do it is stand up for yourself and punch the bully in the nose, make him bloody, and then bully will back down. And this is an experience. This is an experience that China had. China was, for the longest time, China experienced the century of humiliation, whatever, and that changed in 1950 when Korean War happened, and then China made a decision they would not allow United States and the so-called UN forces to cross 38th parallel, and they deliver a warning to the United States: do not cross 38th parallel, or else we will intervene. And when U.S. cross the 38th parallel, Chinese intervene, and they push the U.S. forces all the way from Yalu River to Seoul. And this was back in the days before China was industrialized. China was very poor, it was desperately poor, and not doing well economically, because China just emerged out of Japanese occupation after World War II. So at that time, China was able to do that under such circumstances. Like this is after that, the United States had to learn to respect China.
Yes.
This is how you deal with bullies. You gotta punch them in the nose, and this is the only way. Like Westerners, including Americans, Brits, whatever, they always like to say, "Oh, these natives, the only language to understand is force." This is 100% projection, because that's the only language these Westerners understand is force. You gotta punch them in the nose, and the best way to do that is nuke up. Like the Iranian liberals running on the street, they're correct. They gotta have nukes. They need nukes to defend themselves. And if they have nukes, we would not even be having this discussion right now.
Exactly.
So
it seems like Scott's solution to bullies is to just not bring lunch money to school.
It's not. Bring a baseball bat. No, bring a baseball bat. That's how you deal with the bullies. And so this is get nukes. Iran should get nukes. Like they after this, they better hurry up and get their nukes. Look. There's so many examples in front of them. Look at what happened to Saddam. Look at what happened to Gaddafi. Exactly. They all gave up their nukes, voluntarily. Look at the example of North Korea. Kim Jong-un is happily inspecting his country. Like he doesn't need to worry about any country trying to bomb him. And so this is a lesson for Iran. Maybe sometimes you need to take the pain. I understand the rationale they had for putting off their nuclear program, because they wanted to do well for their people. They wanted to get the sanction lifted. But the problem is they're not dealing with people who are acting in good faith.
There's not honest brokers on the other side.
Exactly. And especially when you saw what happened immediately after the Israeli strike. All the Western leaders, not just United States, but all the European leaders,
Germany, France, UK,
all lining up behind Israel. So you cannot negotiate with these kind of people. Unless you have a big stick, a big nuclear glowing stick, and then they will come to the table. I mean, given the Chinese experience, that's what happened. That's why eventually Nixon went to China in 1972, and then they made peace. But it's peace through strength. And so in this regards, I think it would be foolish for United States to initiate a war against Iran. They will, a lot of the U.S. analysts themselves are I recently saw a talk in the Council of Foreign Relations. They're already talking about, what's the ramification of a war with Iran, and they all agree it's bad, because that means we cannot pivot to China. We cannot pivot to contain China, because for them, they're thinking about their next war, and it's again, it's due to hubris. again, I have a lot of respect for Scott, but even people like Scott, they're still being infected with this kind of American hubris. They still think that U.S. can do whatever you want, and I think this is a lesson also for a lot of people who support the resistance. Is you United States is not this all-powerful being, okay? It's not this indestructible Captain America. United States, like any other countries, they function under real supply constraints, real resource constraint, and all kind of cracks are showing right now. It's war like this, war of attrition is actually how whether you can last longer, right? That's what the experience of Vietnam has shown. The Vietnamese, they're willing to take the pain because their goal is very clear. They got to kick out all those imperialists out of their country.
Yeah.
They're willing to take whatever amount of pain to get there, and they know the United States will not. Americans will not be able to take the pain because that issue is not existential for United States. And same thing with Iran. Whether Iran have nuclear weapon or not, that is not existential to United States. That's existential maybe for Israel, but it's not for United States. So as long as Iranian people persevere, Americans will back down.
Yes.
Don't get into bullies.
Carl, at the start of this interview, I mentioned that I heard 2 interviews. One was yours, and the other one, the guy I listened to, was Victor Gao. Do you know about Victor Gao?
Yeah. He's famous. He's great.
So he's like, he's not like an official spokesperson for Chinese government, but he seems to have very.
He should be.
He should be. He should be. He seems to have very good insight into how the government is thinking, even what the CCP is kind of what angle they're taking. So the things that he says is a very true reflection of what the state is thinking. And the interview I heard of him, he's very kind of firm that China will support Iran and Israel and USA are aggressors. And this war needs to be stopped. And I was really kind of heartened to hear that interview because he came out very kind of firmly in support of Iran. So I thought if he's coming out in support of Iran, it means China is he knows that China is clearly in support of Iran.
Well, I mean, we can also look at the official statement, and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi made a call to the Iranian foreign minister immediately days after Israeli strike and said, we explicitly condemn Israeli aggression and we support Iranian effort to safeguard its own sovereignty, territorial integrity against Israeli aggression. And that, I mean, it's very, very unambiguous statement of support for Iran. And I think also China do not want Iran to fail. The same way China do not want to see Russia fail, in front of a NATO assault. So, but the ways that China does things is a little bit different, right? Like just like China did not get directly involved in the Ukraine conflict, China maintained quote unquote neutrality, but at the same time, that allowed them to maintain the economic lifeline for Russia by keeping the trade open despite all the Western pressures. So China will do the same for Iran. I mean, currently China already purchased 89% of Iranian oil exports. They will continue to do so despite Western sanctions, and they will supply Iran with whatever materials they need to make more ballistic missiles. So Iran just had to make sure to keep their factories open, to keep on cranking out those missiles and keep on launching them. I mean, as long as they can do that, Iran is good. Iran, as long as Iran can keep on producing these missiles, launching these missiles, really, there's not much Israel and United States can do to them at this point.
I think China is so subtle and so polite and civilized in their diplomacy that because we're so used to this kind of Western European American kind of cowboy kind of threats and the kind of statements that Trump makes, sometimes when we, because we're so used to that, when we don't hear similar things from China, we start getting frustrated, thinking China's not doing anything. But China says you have to kind of read between the lines when China's speaking, to understand what they're basically, what their policy is. And I
Yeah,
think that's a really good thing.
I mean, if you look at the records, I mean, China prefer quiet diplomacy, and they prefer to do things under the table, and that they don't want to make a big show out of it, and
Exactly.
but they will do what's needed to be done, and in this case, supporting Iran is also fits into China's own global geostrategy. Because they know America would not stop at Iran or stop at
Yeah.
Russia. China is the ultimate goal, is their ultimate target. So,
Exactly.
but you know what? In the Sun Tzu's Art of War, he clearly said the best way to win a war is without a battle. I mean,
Yes.
that's the strategy China has been pursuing for the last 40 years, and
It is amazing.
this is what that's what they'll continue to do, because China do what they do best, which is to produce. China can produce a lot of goods, and they have a lot of industrial capacity, and through that they're able to support their allies. Whether it's to supply parts to Russia or parts to Iran, they can do that.
Yes.
In the meantime, they can still maintain a civil facade while they continue to
Exactly.
trade with the West, but while keeping their allies supplied.
Yeah. Going back to Trump. So Trump, I won't say that he's crazy, but he does do crazy things. But I think in some ways the strength of Trump is that when he does do crazy things and he realizes it's not working, he'll just do an immediate U-turn. He has no shame. And he also has the backing of, like, the political backing. I think other leaders like Biden, those people, they can't do a U-turn. Once they make a mistake, they double down on it. Whereas a bit like what we talked about, Yemen, he tried it didn't work. So he turned around and he still declared it a victory. And it's the same with the tariffs and everything. So I think in this regards as well, I think that will happen. That
I mean, because Trump is just basically like a cult leader, right?
yeah,
That's a cult will always follow
yeah,
their cult leader. So in this way, that it doesn't matter whether his prediction, or it's like those cult leader who says, "Oh, the world will end on 5 o'clock today," and when the time comes, like, "Oh, actually no, I made a miscalculation. You will actually end like 5 o'clock on Wednesday next week," and their followers will still go along with that. The same thing with the Trump, the MAGA
yeah,
crowd. They will go with Trump, whatever he says, whatever he does. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
This is what makes Trump unpredictable, but you know. Which also make him so predictable, like well, the unpredictability of Trump is that he's very predictable. So
yes, exactly.
I don't think he has a stomach to
Yes,
actually wage like a sustained campaign in Middle East, like the way that U.S. has prosecuted the Iraq War in the past,
yeah.
for example. Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
So um, I think you're absolutely right. I don't see this lasting more than a couple of weeks. I really do hope that it ends as soon as possible for the sake of the Iranian people who did nothing wrong and are suffering the consequences of what Israel did. But I also hope and pray that this also leads to an end of the genocide in Gaza, because at the end of the day, that's where it all started and that's where it all has to go back to. But I also want to just praise Iran. I mean, I think Iran's been in that resistance kind of mode against USA for the longest time. I mean, now it's quite popular to have resistant movements against USA, but Iran's been suffering for the longest time. The wars that they started with Iraq against Iran, and all the sanctions. So I think it's an amazing achievement. And if Iran can withstand all of this, I just can't imagine how it's going to shape the Middle East after this, because um, USA and Israel, all of their diplomacy is just aggression and bullying and domination. And after this, how are they going to be able to keep that up? and how are they going to bully anyone in the region, I think it's going to change everything, and it's going to be very interesting to see how things pan out.
I agree. If especially if they want to drag this out, the longer you drag out, the worse it will be for the American empire and their Israeli project.
Carl, last time when we spoke after the recording ended, you mentioned to me that you do talks on Chinese history. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What do you do? I mean, because you're very knowledgeable about China.
That's actually my passion. My true passion is Chinese history, and I could geek out on that for hours. And I do a chronological retelling of the Chinese history from the very beginning, because I feel like to really understand China, people need to understand its past. And Chinese people themselves, they're very intimately aware of their own past history. Like even the Chinese language interwoven with many references from like the past historical events. So I started from prehistory, and now I'm at 350 BC. So I have a long way to go, but I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. I this is what I enjoy doing, and
that is amazing.
Podcast, Silk and Steel podcast on Patreon, so people can go to the Patreon site and search Silk, and I think Silk and Steel podcast is the first one that come up, and that's where amazing. I primarily is a Chinese history.
Definitely put a link.
Okay, and I also talk about geopolitics on my YouTube channel, which is under Carl Zha, and on Twitter, I'm a prolific shit poster. Just like I like to crack jokes and just like
imagine
having fun. So don't take whatever I say on Twitter seriously, but unless it's true, then do take it seriously.
It's amazing. I follow you on YouTube, but somehow I missed the interviews that you did, the discussions you had with Scott Ritter. So I'm going to go and check those out immediately today. I recommend everyone else to do that as well. And I will.
I think it's in the you might, it might be under the live stream. It's okay. For several months ago. So yeah.
Okay. But also, I would request in future, if you have time for us, I'd love to know more about the Chinese history. I'd love to know more about the Opium Wars and all of that period, because living in the UK, I hear so much like negativity from English people towards Chinese, and I just don't understand it, because if anything is China that should be angry at the British people.
They hate us because we made them invade us. This is I totally understand. It's like they hate us because we made them to sell drugs to us and invade us. So and they feel bad.
Scott Ritter argument. But yeah, so let's do that. I'd love to have a series of talks with you to understand. I'd personally like to understand more about China, and I think it's going to be really interesting for the audience as well.
Sure.
So let's do that. But thank you very much for your time. This has been really interesting, and thank you for joining us at such short notice.
Yeah, no worries.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.